Hi, Jen Leong, licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm back to talk to you more about what to expect when you're grieving. This is the third video in my series. In the first video, we talked about the fact that you can expect to feel a little bit like you're going crazy, and you can expect your grief to be unique. Unique not only to you, but unique each time you grieve someone new. And in the second video, we talked more about the social aspects of our grief and how we can expect people to say the wrong things, even though they mean well, and that we can expect our friends and family members don't know how to support us in our grief. And we also discussed tips on how to handle that and make it more comfortable for everyone and more helpful to you. Now, today I want to talk about our relationship with the person that has died. I've also done one video on just the fact that we have a relationship with a person after they died, and I'm going to link to that in the notes below here on YouTube. So feel free to go and take a look at that. We're going to jump right in with the other half of it, which is expect your relationship with that person to change. And it's going to continue, but it's going to change, and it's not just changing from the moment that they died until the moment after they died, it's changing over time after their death. Now, I'm going to use myself as an example here because I was quite young when my mom died, so it's a really clear example of how relationships change. I was 6 years old, and so I knew my mom as a caregiver. You know, she was a wonderful mom. She took me to school field trips, and we would bake cookies, and of course I'd get in trouble, and I'd be scolded, and she was my disciplinarian, but ultimately she was my caregiver, and that is how I knew my mom. I didn't know anything else about her. When you're 6 years old, you just don't. And then I got into my 20s, and I wanted to learn more about who she was, and so I started talking to people that were in her life. I talked to her best friend and college roommate, and I talked to a woman who was a good friend when I was a little girl. I remember my mom spending time with this woman. And I talked to my uncles, my mom's brothers, and I talked to my dad, and I found out quite a bit about her. I went in with questions, and I wanted to know more, and I learned more about who she was and the struggles she'd had and challenges she had overcome. And through that, my relationship changed, where it wasn't just I thought of her as this caregiver, but I began to have compassion for her and admiration for some of the things she had overcome in her life. And those new pieces influenced how she impacts me every day, even now. When I think about, what would my mom have done? Or, I encounter something out in the world and it makes me go, oh, I bet that's kind of something like what she would have gone through. And it makes me realize just more of who she was. So every day, even now, I'm still impacted by her, and I still have a relationship with her, and it is very different than what that relationship was when I was a little girl. Another example I want to share with you is of someone who had a lifelong relationship with their spouse. This person was a young child overseas during World War II. And so they grew up in a war-torn area, and the person that became their spouse was their playmate and their friend during a fairly scary time. And then they became teenagers and started to, have a romantic interest in each other, and then young adults who really fell in love and chose to move halfway around the world together. And so they were collaborators, and they worked together through so much of their life. And then when I started working with this person, they were in their 80s, and it had been a while since their spouse died. And what they found was that their relationship with their spouse, yes, it definitely continued, but it changed, and instead of being collaborators, their spouse became more of a guide, someone that they would think of and say, well, what would you do? And kind of take on that perspective of what would they do? How would they support me? How would they give me advice right now? And instead of having that interactive collaborator person, it was that guide, and that person still to lean on in some ways, lean on emotionally. No, they're not going to be there to give them the hug, but they were still able to lean on that person for guidance. And of course, they wanted them by their side, but they were very happy to acknowledge that they still had a relationship and that it did continue to change over time. All right, I hope you have found this video helpful, and if you have, you might want to check out other parts of the series or other videos I've done. And if you ever want to talk to me, I would love to talk with you. You can find me on my website at jenleongtherapy.com. Take care.